Bible Answers with Dr. Al Garza.
All right, welcome back to Bible Answers. I am your host, Dr. Al Garza. So today I want to give an update on some of the things that have been going on with the Hebrew New Testament project that I've been working on, and the Matthew project as well. But first, let me say Happy New Year. 2020 was probably a difficult year for a lot of people, especially in the country and in the world. So hopefully 2021, things will start to pick up and get better, and may the Lord's hand be on this nation as it goes through all these different changes in the new presidency if Biden does take office. So again, Happy New Year, and hope everybody's doing a lot better this year with a little more hope and optimism with a lot of prayer. So with that, I want to talk about the New Testament project that I've been working on. But let me say this first, that a couple things that I've come across, new discoveries or rediscoveries. I get a lot of comments, emails regarding the project and what I'm doing, as well as, questions and criticisms regarding those who are of the Greek premise only. And what I mean by that is those who believe the New Testament was only written in Greek, then that is where people we will reject the New Testament in Hebrew as well as anything else that has to do with that, and regard it only as a translation. But let me say this. When you approach any manuscript, and of course any scholar of whether you're studying the New Testament or the Old Testament Hebrew text or the New Testament Greek text, when you go through textual criticism, textual analysis, there are certain things you have to do to determine the authenticity of a text, specifically, determine if it comes from a translation or if it comes from an earlier source of the same language. And those are things we continuously apply to these Hebrew New Testament texts that have been found. So let me say this. Currently, we do have, and I have in my possession, two complete Hebrew New Testament texts from Matthew to Revelation, from two different scribal hands, as well as a number of New Testament Hebrew fragments, pages, incomplete books, whether it's a page of Matthew, a few pages of Luke. We do have whether there's two chapters of Revelation or a full Revelation, a full Jude, a full James, book of James and book of Jude, or pieces of Matthew pages here. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the Gospels. We have a number of complete Hebrew Gospels, Matthew through John. We have a number of them complete. Again, written by different scribal hands, not the same hand. dating between the 12th, 13th century all the way down to the 17th, 18th century. Again, we have to look at them the way we examine or look at Greek texts of the New Testament. So what we got to do is we have to keep an open mind that, we have to determine, do these come from a translation, an earlier translation of a Greek, Latin, or, German text, or do they go back to an earlier Hebrew source text? And there are some that are a translation. We know that the Gospels from Catalan are the Hebrew Gospels of Catalan are from a Catalan language, like a Spanish language. But we also know that those texts were translated from another Hebrew text. So it went from Hebrew to Catalan back to Hebrew. So we can still get a number of things from the text that point to an earlier Hebrew source text before it was translated and retranslated back. And I think that's what we have to do, also look at some of these other texts. There are a number of Hebrew texts, New Testament texts that I've been looking at, that do not point to a different a language source text like Greek or Latin, but go back to an earlier Hebrew source text. And we look at external evidence of the early church father quotations, who examined or saw a Hebrew New Testament text like Matthew and so forth, like Jerome, who, when he wrote his Matthew commentary, he was using a Hebrew Matthew and a Greek Matthew, and some of those differences are found in these Hebrew New Testament texts that we have. But again, we have two complete and possibly a third. I'm working on confirming a third complete Hebrew New Testament, again, from Matthew to Revelation. I have two in my possession, and they are definitely a challenge to go through. And they will take time to examine with the other Hebrew New Testament text. Now, some people will say, Well, they'll ask questions or criticize saying, well, how old are these texts? And again, the age has nothing to do with what's in the text to validate them or authenticate them. 95% of the Greek New Testament's texts come after the 9th century anyway. So we don't have very many that predate the 9th century. We do have a few complete Greek New Testament texts, and so that date between 3rd, 4th century, but the rest, 95% of the rest of them, and the fragments and the pages come after the 9th century. So again, the dating has nothing to do with it. It's what's in the text we have to determine. Can they be authenticated and point back to an earlier Hebrew source text? Now, we have to consider the fact that just like the Greek New Testament, these Hebrew New Testament texts have to be taken seriously. There's some wealth of information within these texts that I think a lot of people miss. And I put this out in my book. If you haven't gotten my book, the Hebrew New Testament Evidence and Issues, then I'd recommend reading it, because I go through some of these textual variants between the Hebrew and the Greek New Testament, as well as how we can authenticate them. We know that Jesus spoke Hebrew. He was a Hebrew-speaking Jew. He was not a Hellenistic Jew. He did not read from the Septuagint, but at the temple and the local synagogues within the Judean desert, he was reading from the Hebrew text. Did he know Greek? Yes, he did. I'm sure he did. He knew Aramaic from the Aramaic Targum commentaries. He also probably maybe even knew Latin. Paul, we know, was a Hebrew-speaking Jew who knew Greek and who knew Aramaic. He references the Aramaic Targum in one of his letters. So again, we know that they were trilingual, but their mother tongue, when Jesus spoke to the disciples and to the Pharisees and the local Jews, they were speaking Hebrew. And we see the difference in Acts 6:1 between a Hellenistic Jew and a Hebrew-speaking Jew. In Acts 6:1, you see them together eating with a dispute about the widows. And that's what you had. You had Hellenistic Jews on one side and the Hebrew-speaking Jews on the other. And we know that today as a fact. There's a lot of great books out there. Again, I put the sources in my book, Hebrew New Testament, which you can check the link down below. As well as if you want to look at some of these Hebrew New Testament texts that I do have, and the photos of some of them, I posted single pages of them, not all of them. You can go to the website link below and check them out for yourself. But again, we have to consider these things seriously. These are great discoveries. Complete Hebrew New Testament texts from Matthew to Revelation, 2 full different Scribal hand books, as well as fragments of the Hebrew New Testament texts from different time frames from different Scribal hands. And that's what we have to need to understand. This is not simply one person writing. These are different Jewish scribes from different Jewish communities, some from Rome, from Italy, some from Spain, some from India, and everywhere in between. So we know they exist. We know they're out there. Authenticating them is the process. Now, here's what I would say to those who criticize and say, we have 6,000, almost 6,000 Greek New Testament manuscripts. How many of the New Testaments do we have? And they want to base this as a volume. The more you have, the better. Well, that's not how it works. We have more Latin translation texts, Latin New Testament texts. We do have Greek. It doesn't mean it was originally written in Latin. But again, I would say this: we need to be careful. It took 1,500 plus years to get to the text that we have today, just to get to 6,000 Greek New Testament texts. Okay, during the time of the 4th, 5th century, we only had limited copies. The next few hundred years, we started seeing other incomplete Greek New Testament texts, and a lot of variants coming along. And then, as of today, 1,500 years or so later, we have only 6,000 Greek New Testament texts. Whereas in the Hebrew, we just started. We do have 2 complete Hebrew New Testament texts. And then we have a bunch of different pages and leaflets, fragments that we have to kind of look at. And again, these are not complete. Some of these are not complete. Again, we only have 2 complete New Testament books. Maybe a third. I'm looking at confirming a third. But as long as it took to get to the Greek 6,000 New Testament texts, 1,500 years and everywhere between, yes, I suspect that as more and more Hebrew New Testament texts come online, being scanned by these different libraries in Cambridge, Oxford, the Hebrew University, the Vatican Archives, Jewish Theological Seminary. These texts, as they get scanned and put online, as they get discovered and rediscovered, I think we'll see that there's a lot more than what to anticipate. Because things that people say is we don't have any existing New Testament Hebrew texts. Yeah, we do. We have quite a few, and it's growing. Not to the point of of the 6,000 Greek New Testament texts, but we have enough to say and show there's something here that point to an earlier Hebrew source text that was probably lost, preserved by Jewish communities, lost in between, because again, these were considered amongst Jews heretical books of the New Testament written in Hebrew. And to say they come from a copy of a Greek, well, again, the burden of proof is on the person who claims that, because for a Jew to hold a copy of a Greek New Testament and know that Greek and then have to translate into Hebrew, that's most unlikely. There had to be a Hebrew source text that went back earlier for them to continue to copy it, the Hebrew text. These are copies of copies of copies, just like the Greek, but they're in Hebrew. So we need to look at that. We need to consider it. It's not by volume, but what's in the text. In my book, again, I've written a couple books on it. Specifically Jesus in the Hebrew New Testament text. That's another book. Evidence and Issues of the Hebrew New Testament text. That's another book. And all I'm pointing out is that these are, to me, huge discoveries. I'm not the only scholar out there that's discovered this. There are other scholars out there doing studies on other Hebrew New Testament texts. I'm trying to validate another complete Hebrew New Testament text. So far I have two. Plus I have a lot of the pages, single pages, and I'm going through them. Specifically complete Hebrew Matthews, Mark, Luke, and John. And I'm comparing them to other Hebrew Gospels that are out there, as well as some of the, Paul's letters, two separate Hebrew texts of Paul's letters and the epistles. So again, this to me is groundbreaking, because we've neglected the fact that there were Hebrew New Testament writings that got lost in the Jewish communities, but preserved, obviously, because we do have some of them now. And for the Greek premise only, it was ignored, because the common belief here in the West was that it was originally written in Greek and that's it. Everything else is a copy or a translation copy. And that is now being kind of debunked with these Hebrew New Testament texts. So I'm very proud to be studying them, humbled to be studying them, because I'm able to get them. I have Hebrew University, got copies from them, scanned copies of one of them, complete Hebrew New Testament from India, another one from Rome, Italy, that was put in the Vatican Archives, as well as other fragments from Cambridge and Oxford, single pages of the different Gospels in Hebrew. So I'm seriously going through these texts. It is take time, and I'll keep publishing some other work. But if you go to the links below, you can see some of these. I just took a page or two from some of these works at the website down below, and take a look at them for yourself. And there's still a lot more. And people are still discovering, other scholars are discovering more and more. So I got to say, we got to keep an open mind. We got to be serious about this. This is serious work. This isn't work that is just, that should not be looked at, because these are texts that point to Jesus as being Adonai in the Hebrew, that the Jewish scribes, by tradition, in certain passages in the Gospels and by Paul, called Jesus Adonai, which is a substitute name of God, directly the name of God. Some of these do contain the very name of God with complete vowel points, which, is completely rare to see. We do have a lot of different variants, whereas in the Greek Gospel of Matthew, you have things that aren't there that are found in the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew. I put that in my book regarding Talitha Kumi, the little girl, where Jesus' little girl rise, which is only found in Mark, but in these Hebrew text, it's also found in Matthew without a translation. It's just in Hebrew. There's a lot of things in here that I point out in my book that authenticate and can show that these go back to an earlier Hebrew source copy. Now, again, these are copies of copies of copies, but they go back to an earlier Hebrew copy, source copy, to the time of Jerome or further back. Not all of them. Now, some of them we can say, well, they're probably a translation from Greek or Latin. and that's true in some cases. But even those copies, we have to look at how did they determine the tradition of certain names, beliefs. Again, going back to Adonai, or certain belief copies of how we look at the traditions of the text going back to earlier first century Jewish sources. And I think that's important. So, but the ones that I've been looking at to so far, they don't go back to a Greek or Latin translation, but go back to an earlier Hebrew source copy. And I'm still going through a lot of them. And so are other scholars that are doing this. And then again, I'll be publishing my work, putting it out there, submitting it. And and again, it's going to take time. It's not an easy process. So I just want to give a quick update on this. If you have any questions, you could leave them here. Questions, comments, you can email me. Again, go to the website to look at some of these New Testament texts that we have right now. And there is more. There's just so much more. And so take a look at them. You can get a copy of my book and see some of the examples that I put on. You can find that at Amazon. Click the link below. You can order it there. I do have specials at my website, dralgarza.org. You can pick it up there at a lower cost. And again, if you have any questions or comments, just let me know, and I'm glad to respond. But I want to thank you for listening. But again, this is an update on the Hebrew New Testament project and the Matthew project that I've been working on. And again, I want to say thank you. God bless. Thank you for supporting the ministry. Thank you for liking and subscribing. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and get more updates. I want to say thank you and have a blessed new year, and talk to you soon. God bless.
Bible Answers with Dr. Al Garza.